Do you have a second to help us pick a title?
Oh, absolutely. For this?
Yeah. So one of my
sure.
secret joys is I get to write down cool things you said that would sound like a good title. So
Okay.
I'm going to read them back to you. Just let me know what your favorite is.
All right.
The Village Blacksmith, The Next Story, My Little Treasure Chest, The Weight of 9 Million Books, The Writer Who Lived in a Shoe, What is the Most Important Thing in Life, Writer in Residence, Where is the Adventure Today, I'm Always Inspired, and Don't Believe in the Box.
Oh, I love Writer in Residence. That just made me go my heart over Edgar Allan Poe.
Welcome to Season 6, Episode 49, Writer in Residence. Written on the Edge. I'm Vance Bastian here with my co-host, S.A. Baz Collins.
Hello.
We're really glad you're here with us. Our guest today is Gregory Norris. He was raised on a healthy diet of creature double features and classic science fiction TV. Gregory writes for national magazines, short story anthologies, novels, and the occasional episode for film and television. Norris writes the Day After Tomorrow series for Anderson Entertainment in the UK, based on the Gerry Anderson NBC made-for-TV movie, while he watched and loved as a boy and worked on Paramount's Star Trek Voyager series as a screenwriter. Norris lives at the Norris lives at the outer limits of New Hampshire's North Country in a century-old house called Xanadu with his giant rescue cat and emerald-eyed muse. Gregory, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. What a delight to be here.
So that's an impressive resume all the way around.
Thank you.
Yeah, what have you been doing with your life?
Well, this, that, the other, mostly the other.
So where did the fire start to become a writer?
Well, I have to say, I again, according to the bio, I grew up just lost in these fantastic monster movies when I was a kid and science fiction series. And I grew up in the country where there wasn't a heck of a lot to do. So I guess I was always writing stories in my mind.
Nice.
When I was 5, I had this fantastic day on my grandmother's sofa staring up at this print of a famous painting called I believe it's the Village Blacksmith is the official name of it. It was won in 1970. If you were the first 100 people to enter this grocery store, you got a copy, this framed print. And it was above her sofa, and it is absolutely stunning. You look at it and you see the contrast of the light and the shadows and the characters, and there's so much going on in this print. Well, it's now upstairs in my hallway, and every morning when I glide out of my bedroom to come downstairs to grab my coffee and write, it's the first thing I see.
Nice.
In the morning. But when I was 5 years old, I was on the sofa staring up at that painting, creating stories for those characters. So that, I think, is really the genesis, the beginning. When I really fell in love and realized that I wanted to be a writer and only a writer was the summer I turned 15. Most of my friends had gone off to camp or whatever, and I was writing this epic science fiction novel that is to this day archived with everything I've ever written behind me in those cabinets. And I had made them all characters, and they were dying to find out what happened. So they left, for the summer to go to camp, and they didn't know what was going on with their characters. And when they came back, I had finished the novel on a sleepover at one of my friends' houses.
Nice.
And had this rush of inspiration unlike anything I've ever felt before. It was like, the Big Bang recreated in every cell in my body, because I'd hit the end on this novel when I was 15. And as soon as that incredible, stunning shock passed, I grabbed a fresh notepad of paper, a fresh fountain pen, and I started writing the next story. And I said on that night, I'm going to be a writer, only a writer. And so far, pretty much so good.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
So you have a novel out. X marks the spot. Recent novel, I should say.
As we were talking about novels.
Yeah.
I do. I meant to grab it because it's just, the cover is just so beautiful.
Oh, it's stunning.
You probably really can't see it, but it's just, such a beautiful.
Don't worry, I'll fly it
cover.
up. It'll be up.
We'll splash it up.
So yeah, it was just released in September. It won a contest. It has gotten some pretty good reviews so far. It was in Publishers Weekly, which, they're almost next to impossible to get into. And my book got into it. And they didn't savage it too badly.
Nice.
I was actually really, really proud of the nice things they said about it.
Very nice. And
Excellent.
to quote my husband's favorite captain, you wrote a story about time travel.
Yes, a big Voyager theme. It's about a man who is haunted by the loss of his first love, goes back in time through really sinister means to the time, the summer, that the death happened, and starts to really corrupt time to the point that he doesn't realize that in saving the first love of his life, he's ending up dooming the second love, who he's married to in the present.
Right. Dun, dun, dun. Time shenanigans ensue.
Yes.
So
as they always do.
Right. Did you base this on anything in the real world, or did the story just come to you in a flash of inspiration?
Well, it's kind of circuitous. Back in the summer of 2006, I had this dream from start to finish. I was not at that point married to my husband, Bruce, but we were together. We were partners and living together. And that summer, I had this dream about going back in time and saving the first love of my life, but unfortunately dooming the one that I was with. And I wrote it down on a note card, and it went into the card catalog that's just over my shoulders, where all of my story ideas are archived, sort of in like my little treasure chest. I go in there and I pull them out and I write the stories based upon them, but I keep everything archived in there. In 2020, on January 14th at 3:52 in the afternoon,
Wow.
it's unfortunate that that's burned into my brain. My husband, took his last breath and passed away. He had been cursed with a version of Parkinson's that's called supranuclear palsy, which is sort of the evil, vicious cousin of Parkinson's, which has a hunger more like ALS. It's 100% fatal. They don't know where it comes from. It calcifies the brain. And so he passed away in January of 2020. And I was given the opportunity to write this novel for the contest. And I thought it was the time to do it, to honor him. So I pulled the card out on the day of his birthday, May 26th, 2020. I sat down in my sun porch, which is my al fresco summer writing room, my summer office, with its view of the mountains and the river and the beautiful neighborhood I live in. And I just wrote that book in 3 weeks, the novel in 3 weeks.
Wow.
And it won the contest. It was published. It has done a lot, and more than I expected it to. And I'm tremendously proud of it. And one of the weird sort of side cars that have come from this whole thing is now every May 26th, I start a novel on Bruce's birthday. And the one I wrote this year is coming out in September, or coming out in May, called The Lost City of Books. And then I'm starting the next book for my publisher at Woodhall Press, who published X Marks the Spots. Mm-hmm. On his birthday in May, I'm going to start the next one for them. So it's sort of a new tradition based on what has happened. And I'm trying to turn that dark anniversary into something positive.
I really love that. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you.
What a way to honor his memory, too.
Yeah, he loved books. I mean, when my house, Xanadu, which is, this big, beautiful house that he restored, top to bottom, front to back, it is the most beautiful house. You couldn't pay me $1 trillion to leave this place. But when it finally collapses, down into the basement, it will be from the weight of the 9 million books in this house. We have a library upstairs that was his, and the library is just beautiful. It's full of books. It's full of his books, wonderful books. So he loved that, and he would have really appreciated, that nod to his birthday.
Can I ask if the house is named for Kubla Khan or Olivia Newton-John's Xanadu?
Both. If you walk through,
Nice.
you walk into my
You hear
sun
that,
porch.
Olivia? We want you to come visit.
Hey, let me tell you, I'm sure this will come up, but when you lose somebody you love, the love of your life, there's nobody shows up at your door and says, this is how you cope with it. So what I did was I started watching The Three Stooges to remember how to laugh for the first time in, 40 years. Writing nonstop and listening to Olivia Newton-John. I mean, nonstop. And that's how I got through it. But when you walk through the sun porch, there's a sign that has the Coleridge poem.
Nice.
In Xanadu did Kubla Khan the pleasure dome decree. So that painting is out there to greet you in the house. But so the thing about Xanadu, the movie, when I was 15 that summer, I went to that movie with my friends before, we had to return to high school. And that silly, wonderful movie is about following your dreams. And I walked out of there and there was this massive full moon and this beautiful summer sky. And I shouted out, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be a writer. And I never stopped. I never looked back. And, and you probably, that's the wall with all the celebrities. And there's Olivia
there she is.
With, one of the original movie posters. So every day that's what's staring over my shoulder while I write.
That's fantastic.
So do your novels come to you like in dreams like that? Because I have to tell you, I had a really bizarre dream after I ate some fried chicken just before bed. And
that'll do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I was suddenly like recruited by the FBI to break up a Vietnamese sex cult, and I'm still trying to make sense of that one.
Well, it's really funny. The little bastards come flying at me like Yorkshire Terriers, and they latch onto my ankles. And they just, I'll be minding my own business. There I was sitting in the front parlor, watching General Hospital, and then like 5 of them attack me. They come from everywhere. Some of the best ideas that I've had the joy of writing have been from dreams. Generally, it's MSG, Chinese takeout. Boom! There's a whole 10-book deal waiting to be written.
Right.
They come from everywhere. The novel that I'm going to start on May 26th, which will be my 3rd book for Woodhall Press since X marks the spot.
Mm-hmm.
I'd had this bizarre dream, and it was so ridiculous, and it made so little sense, but it wouldn't leave me alone. And I was at the sink washing the dishes, and then I'm like, this is what happens, and this is what happens, and now it's a whole novel called The Sepulchre, and it's so spooky, and it all makes sense, even where it doesn't make sense. What I've tried to train myself to do is for the longest time, I don't trust my memory, even though I have a very good Germanic, nearly eidetic memory. I write things down. I put them down. I'm like, I don't trust myself to remember all of these details and nuances, so I write it down as soon as it comes to me. And then when I sit down to start, I jump in, and I have my note card with all of my notes on it, and I just go start to finish, and I don't stop till I get to the end. I don't go back and edit first or rewrite. I write to the end. I'm like, get to the end, and then you can go back and do the fine-tuning.
Right. Nice. Can we jump back to X marks the spot for just a second?
Absolutely.
Can I ask which laws of time travel you decided to adhere to in your novel?
The ones that I adhered to was, so my character on the 10th year anniversary crashes his car into the same tree where the ex-lover died. Oof. And wakes up in the past. So it was sort of a recreation of the events on the dark anniversary. Mm-hmm. And so, the law is that if you tamper with time, time will adjust and time will exert, its demands. And if it sipped blood the first time, it's going to want blood the second time. And so instead of the first lover hitting the tree on that pivotal date in the past, mm-hmm. things are set up so that it's the one who becomes his husband in the future, and to balance things out. So
right.
But the thing is, though, is in my book, even small tamperings end up leading to big changes because they ripple.
Time pushes back.
And so that I pretty much followed. But at its heart, the story is a love story. It's about even though there were these trappings of science fiction and time and space and dark forces and time travel, it's really at its heart, it's about being in love and how far you would go for that love. I mean, and it was an opportunity for me to be with my husband again.
Right. And that's what makes it a very human story.
Sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a question though. Do a lot of your works, I mean, are they in specific genre, or are they just kind of, they are what they are?
You know, I am one of those writers who is probably so stupid and so, cursed by the fact that I write everything. If a story comes to me, I don't judge it. The good, the bad, and the ugly. There's no genre, bias. I love romance. I love science fiction. I love horror. I love mystery, and I love literary writing too. Beautiful literary writing. And if the idea comes to me, I'm just going to write it and not worry about sending it out or selling it or tempering it to somebody's needs. This morning, I'm working on the 10th story of possibly 30 that I've been assigned by a gaming company who hired me last year to write a dozen fantasy stories to promote the release of a role-playing game. And he came to me and said, I know you're busy. I hope you're not too busy. I've got this list of ideas that I would love someone to write, and I would love for it to be you more than anyone based upon what you've done in the past. So in the last, I think it's, 31 days, I've written 10 of these stories, and I've got I'm sorry, this is the 10th one. I've written 9. This one, and I'm on like the last 2 pages, and I love it. And it's so dark and it's so hopeless. And then the one that I wrote before then was full of hope and sunshine and happy. I mean, it's whatever the story is, and I judge it as being, a story. It's one of my babies. I gather them like the writer who lived in a shoe who had 1,578 children and didn't know what to do, just wrote them. I don't worry about the market first. I worry about the story first and writing it in a way that seems honest. And then I worry about the marketing stuff, because I do wear that hat as well. Having been published, really since 1991, this is my 30th year in this business. And behind me are 2 cabinets filled with, anthologies I've been in, magazines I've been in, newspapers I've been in. There's an entire video drawer that has DVDs and things like that, which are my work. But it's to me, it's the joy is the writing, is getting the story told and living the story and enjoying the story while it's being told, and not worrying, well, this isn't categorized as a romance, this isn't categorized as a mystery. It's like, I'm just going to tell the story and I'll worry about all that stuff afterwards.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I like that, because I mean, then the story has its own value in what it is. It's not, like you say, written to market. It's, which is the best kinds of stories. When we started categorizing things, because people love science fiction, I think that people cut themselves off from too many amazing tales by saying, oh, well, I only read romance.
Exactly. I read everything. I can't read enough. I don't care if it's a romance novel, whether it's an erotica novel, whether it's, a murder mystery. If it's well written and it surprises me, I can't put it down, I'm like, I'm richer because of it. Who was it? I think it was George R.R. Martin that says, and I'm paraphrasing that, that a reader lives 1,000,000 lives, and if you don't read, you only live one. I mean, how exciting, to be that blessed to be able to vanish into fiction and stories and truths and fictions, that easily.
Right. All right. Anything else you want folks to know about X Marks the Spot? And I'm trying to avoid spoilers, so I'm not going to ask about the ending, though I desperately want to know.
Well, I thank you for saying that. It's funny, you write a book and you never know what the outcome is going to be. You just do your best every time and you aim for a solid A before you hit send to the publisher. I'm really proud of it. It's when I was doing the edits, which were so minor, the copy editor would send you back, and then you want to run through it from start to finish to make sure you caught everything, and to see if you agree with the edits as well. And they were so minor, but there was in that span of time very quickly, where I had to read the book 3 times, like in the space of maybe 2.5 weeks. And it wasn't like just scan through it. I wanted to read it start to finish. And as painful as it is for me, to revisit it, I made myself listen to it. I put the Dark Shadows soundtrack on in the background.
Yay, someone who does what I do.
Oh, absolutely. Listen,
I collect scores. That's all I do. And when I write to scores.
Absolutely. I had Robert Cobert's haunting, thrilling Dark Shadows TV show, playing nonstop for a couple of hours. But, I ran through the book 3 times and read it 3 times. And I'm like, wow, I'm really proud of this.
That.
It's painful for me because I have the connection as to why I wrote it. But I absolutely, I'm so proud of it. And I think it's a book about a lesson that I've had to learn, which is, what is the most important thing in life? And it is, it is love. I mean, love is the most, whether it's the love you have for a spouse, a pet, an art, how far you would go to protect that. And I wasn't able to protect my husband, but I've kind of immortalized him in my writing. And I, that's how I can keep him alive.
No, and I get that because, it's something that I'm dealing with. I went through my own battle with cancer, and then right after I got my no evidence of disease status, which we're now monitoring, my husband was diagnosed with leukemia. So we went from one cancer ride to another. And there's a part of me that, that I want to write, and I aspire to write to the level that I because he's got a double doctorate. He was a psychiatrist, and then he gave up dealing with people, and he went and dealt with stars. So he worked for NASA and did physics. So he's got a really fulfilled life. He did a lot of things, but I try to aspire to the level of what he likes to read, and that's the way that I try to honor him. And there'll be times where he'll read the stuff and he'll go, okay, that's you need to go back to that because that's not where you are. And so he's my harshest critic, but I like that because I know every single harsh criticism is a stroke of love on what I'm trying to accomplish, So I totally feel for what you're saying because that's where I find myself in my writing journey. I'm struggling with trying to figure out how do I balance the life stuff with the creation stuff. And for me, like it sounds like you, for me, the creation is everything. After it's out in the world, that it's got its own life, and that's not me anymore. For me, it's all about the creation. Is that what it is for you?
It's really funny. Out of the blue, I'll get a fan letter, a book that I wrote 30 years ago. And then I have an editor in England, the fantastic Marnie Ray Scafidio. One of the first editors I worked with back in 1991, she bought a short story for her horror magazine, Not at Night, which, is my copy is as pristine today as it was 30 years ago. She reached out to me and she said, I'm editing this anthology. It's a charity to benefit the Wales Humane Society. Would you write a story for it? And I sat down and, the gigantic, let me see if we can see her again. The gigantic,
Husker.
There she is.
Oh, yay, there you go.
Our gigantic rescue cat who, the night that my husband passed away, would not leave his side. She actually jumped on top of his body and would not leave him. I had to pull her off of him when the funeral home showed up. And she was none too happy about that because she loved him. She was so loyal. Well, we rescued her when she was on her way to a kill shelter. The person who had her didn't want her. Somebody called up and said, hey, you're a cat person. This cat is going. I'm like, did not want a cat, another cat, at that point, because I was caring for Bruce, but I was not going to say no. And so she showed up and turned out to be the most loyal, wonderful cat. Well, the long and short of it is we saved her. She saved me all last year.
Absolutely.
And so I wrote this story about her story for this anthology. And it, again, there's no way to remove that day in January 2020 when Bruce passed away because it's so integral to her story. So, 30 years after writing that first short story for Not at Night, here I was recently writing this story for a charity anthology. So it's incredible how the work has staying power. The product is always out there. Something that you write always is out there somewhere with someone who remembers it, and that means we've done our job. Is when we resonate with readers, we have done our job. I have inspired, disgusted, aroused, infuriated, and made my readers laugh, and I'm so happy, because the one thing they've never said is I've made them bored. That's the one thing that I don't want to do, is to bore them.
Absolutely. That was literally our first, I remember Vance saying that from our very first episode. The worst kind of review is a meh.
Exactly.
Yep.
That's what you want to avoid.
I've had one of the best fan letters I ever had. It's still in there in my filing cabinets. Was for a gothic romance that I wrote, and the reader said that he and his lover would read the book to each other in bed, and I'm like,
yeah, I do that with my husband.
Fantastic.
I get it. I get it.
My God, you couldn't ask for anything better than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do that with my husband. I get it.
Yeah.
Very
so
cool.
Everybody's going, you lead a strange life, Bass.
No, you lead a fulfilled life.
Fulfilled, yes.
Well, thank you. My husband would beg to differ. Anyways, are you ready for some get to know you questions?
Oh, go for it. Open book.
All right. Well, before we get started with that, we want to remind our viewers and our listeners that Wrote Podcast is only doing this out of a labor of love and by support from you guys out there. So if you like what we do, please subscribe, purchase the books from our authors and our guests who are on our show. It helps them. It helps us. Remember to subscribe. I'm starting to sound like Barbara Streisand back in the 60s where she says subscription. Subscribe, and tell your friends about the show. Vance is going, this is why I do the announcements. And to remember, we also have a swag shop at Redbubble, Wrote Podcasts. We have 2 lines, a Pride t-shirt line, which has a different queer author with a quote attributed to them, one for each color in our rainbow flag. And we have a drag queen line, so little drag queens throwing some shade kind of t-shirts and stuff that you can purchase. So definitely check that out. I will put the link up there so people can see. I'm Carol Merrilling it.
You are.
Anyways. The kids don't get that reference.
Price is right. Price is right. Quote. Fantastic.
Right.
So what's up next for you? I mean, obviously you've got your book that is you started last May, but you've got a new book starting. You've got a full plate. Anything else?
Well, it was really funny. I decided that I was going to have a very low-key 2022, and maybe write more things for fun and clear my list of all of the projects that have not yet been completed. And I complete everything. Even the ugliest children that I've birthed, I make sure that they get their
to have a full story.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I don't judge them in first draft. I judge them in second draft. But funnily enough, the universe had other plans. So as I've referenced, I've got this big fantasy short story contract, which I'm working through. I had 20 ideas in the card catalog, which is the smallest it's ever been since I was 15 years old, and there were a dozen, excuse me. Now it's down to 20. Well, and then out of the blue, these fantasy stories. So I've been working on that. There's an anthology that's reading for Kolchak the Night Stalker fiction to commemorate the 50th anniversary. And the other day I was coming home from a medical appointment, and like the idea crackled down on a lightning bolt from Mount Helicon and went right up my ass. I'm like, this is the story. This is the one I'm going to write. And I know the editor. He's bought work from me before, so I'm writing a story for that. And then, I think I told you I'm wearing my Edgar Allan Poe Poe is my favorite. I've been published with reprints by Poe 5 times in my career. And
Wow.
he's always been my favorite. He was my grandmother's favorite. I can quote Lenore. She used to be able to recite The Raven start to finish. And I can quote Lenore start to finish. And one of my publishers, the one who's publishing The Lost City of Books in May, came to me and said, "You're the only person I would ask to do this. I want to do a tribute to Edgar Allan Poe, where we take 3 to 5 poems or stories and you rewrite them, or you honor them with a modern Gothic retelling." So of course, I peed a little just at that concept, because who wouldn't want to be the one asked to do that?
Right.
So I'm starting January 1. I'm starting my tribute to Lenore, which is my favorite, but it's Len, and it's going to be a male-male romance set in the 1960s. But it's going to follow the poem. And then we're doing the House of Usher, but I'm calling it Usher Falls after the town. And then we're redoing The Conqueror Worm, The Mask of the Red Death, and the 5th one to be determined by the publisher after she's read the entire completed works. She's going to come back to me and say, "This is the 5th one." Because I requested Lenore, and I said, "It's only fair you have the 5th say." So I'm doing that, and the deadline for that is July of 2022. My goal is to have it done by May 25th, so that on the next day I can start my new novel for Woodhall Press.
Nice.
I'm putting a science fiction novel that I wrote on the computer. Moshe Fader at Tor Books requested it. So, it's getting put on the computer right now as we speak for him. So I'm juggling probably, a few dozen projects at the same time, and that's fine. I mean, my God, what a gift, and how lucky and how blessed. And I never feel like, oh my God, it's too much. I need a break. I never feel I'm like, oh, let's tackle that today and go to bed tonight knowing that we made progress. And every night, when I stagger upstairs, like, Freddy Krueger, but instead of like machetes on my fingers, it's like fountain pens. And I'm like walking upstairs like the Claw. But I stagger into bed with these god-awful writer's cramps, and I'm like, look what I did today. Look what you got done today. And I feel like I'm 15 years old again and full of inspiration. So.
Well, I have to say, I do love that you said you peed a little, because I grew up with 2 black drag queens that were like my mothers growing up, my queer mothers. And they used to always say, if you laughed, if the joke was funny enough or you laughed, they always asked, "But did you pee?" And the response, if it was good, was, "Oh, I peed." So I love that you used that. I'm like, oh, it just brought it home for me.
The best.
All right, Gregory. Any other words of wisdom for folks?
I was thinking about that, and I would just say for people who write, writing is not easy, but for me, it never feels like work. It always feels like, like the biggest Christmas. Even like the worst day writing is the best day writing. So one of the things that I absolutely have come to embrace is that I don't believe in the writer's block. I instead believe in the muse. I think if you're going to, give something energy and life by devotion, I'd rather believe in, the mysterious figure that inspires you to create, rather than, the big galumphing storm cloud in the room that stops you. And so what I do believe in is, instead of the block, is passion power outage, that sometimes you just need to recharge the batteries, take a nap, take a walk, take a breather, and then come back to it fresh, And
I think people need to realize that that's part of the writing process. That's not a block. That's you working through the craft,
Yep.
And working through, just because, a piece of writing challenges you doesn't mean you shovel it aside because you don't want to deal with whatever it is that it is covering. And, some of the stuff I'm proudest of is the stuff that was the most difficult to write about. My husband's death, loss, that kind of stuff really does challenge you. But my God, when it's done, when it's down on paper, when it's published, when you're holding it in your hand, you're like, my God, did I Did I actually get through that? Yes, I did. I can do anything, you know. Also,
Perfect.
when you've worked for Paramount, you know, that right then and there challenges just about every horror, you know, story that you could imagine, you know, your life devolving into. So, you know, that sort of sets a bar where everything else is like, that was nothing. Got through it.
Right. If I survived that.
Yeah. Needle in the eyeball, bring it on.
Ouch. All right, folks. Written on the Edge is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. I just forgot something really important. Gregory, where's the best socials for people to follow you?
You can check me out on Facebook. I'm so easy to find on Facebook. And, you know, you can also check out GregoryLNorris.blogspot.com. And I keep an infrequent blog there. I kept it very frequently for, you know, a decade. But it's still there, and I still visit it from time to time, and it's about my writing adventures. And let me just say, Vance and Baz, what an absolute delight this was. What a treat.
It was for us too. Thank you.
And you come back whenever, you know, when you've got your next thing you want to talk about. This is not a one-time deal.
Oh,
you know,
fantastic.
Door is always open. You just let us know.
Well, I really appreciate that. And gentlemen, with your own writing, just have the best time and the greatest success.
Well, thank you. All right, folks, pick up X Marks the Spot. It's a story from the heart, written from a perspective that knows both the science fiction and the human life. You'll enjoy your read, I promise. We'll talk to you all again soon. Bye-bye. And we'll cut there.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.